Hello, and welcome to the Building an Indie Business Podcast with SupremeRumHam. I'm your host, Alex Edmonds. Today, I will be doing a very light episode. I'm doing an episode on the history of the podcast industry. So the format for this episode is I will say a month and year, sometimes just a year, and I will say what happened in that year. And on occasion, I will say why this is important, or I will give commentary on the fact or the thing that I mentioned. The fact. Okay. So let's get into it. 2003. Adam Curry and Dave Weiner invent podcasting. And in 2004, the podcast is given its name. It is based on the words iPod and broadcast. Okay, so why this is important is because it's the very beginning of podcasting. Okay, so 2003, the first podcast, Radio Open Source, is started. This is a podcast that is still active, and it is hosted by, at one point it was hosted by David Weiner, but it's hosted by Christopher Lydon. So yeah, it's still active. If you guys want to listen to it, check it out. 2004, the first podcast host, Libsyn, is started. Okay. For those of you that don't know, RSS stands for Real Simple Syndication. Okay. June 2005, Apple starts to support podcasts. Okay. 2005, U.S. President Bush launches his own podcast, and this is where he talks about it's his weekly address to the nation. Okay. 2005, podcast is added as a word in the dictionary. May 2007, Bill Burr starts the Monday Morning Podcast, and this is important because it is the my favorite podcast. Okay. 2003, Apple announces 1 billion subscribers of podcasts. Okay. Did I say 2003? No, that was 2013. Yeah, okay. 2014, Serial. This is important because Serial is the most downloaded podcast with 420 million downloads. So it shows that it took 9 years for podcasting to get some traction in the mainstream media. Okay, 2014, I graduate high school. Yep. Not very important, but it actually was important to me. Whatever. Okay. September 2014, Kid Cudi is a guest on Joe Rogan's podcast. Why this is important is because it's the very first podcast that I listened to. Okay. I don't think I listened to a podcast for much. It took me about another year to actually get into podcasting, but okay. Or become interested in the podcast industry, listening to podcasts. Okay. Let's see. 2015, President Obama is a guest on Mark Maron's WTF podcast. Okay. This is important because a sitting president, not standing, is a guest on a podcast. This is a really big deal. Okay. 2015, Anchor started, and this is a big deal because Anchor made it easier for people to start their own podcast, as well as, not as well as, but because it was free, so it lowered the barrier for entry for people to start a podcast. Okay. 2016, the New York Times launches the Daily. And this is important because mainstream media joins the podcast industry. Okay. The next one is October 2018. I buy a microphone with the idea of starting a podcast, with no idea of a topic. And why this is important is because this is the first time that I take an interest in podcasting. And it's my first step into starting open podcasts. Yeah. So basically what I would do is I would take a walk and I would talk into the headphones of my phone, and I would just talk. I'd take a walk and I'd talk, and I try to stretch out my talking for the entire walk. And every time I saw someone was in their driveway or something, I'd start to talk like this. And so when I listened back, I could know right there that someone was right in front of me. And initially, I wanted to write articles and then read those articles on a podcast. And my idea was to do a podcast on financial topics. So I wanted to talk about how certain industries make money. So I did an article on the podcast industry and the players in the podcast industry. So I did an article, which you can still see on my blog, about how Apple makes money in the podcast industry, how podcasters can make money in the industry, and then how Spotify can make money in the podcast industry. And this is right as Spotify was entering the podcast industry. Okay. And then, yeah, that's about it for that part. Okay. So, February 2019, Spotify buys Anchor. Okay. And this is a big deal because Apple now has some competition in the podcast industry. Okay. Yeah. March 8th, 2019. The Building an Indie Business podcast is released. Okay. And this is important because this is my podcast. This is the podcast you're listening to right now. And this is important because this is my next step into open podcasts. At first, I had the idea to start a podcast directory, but with not, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an open sourced one. Or no, a crowdsourced one. That was the word I was using at the time. And the reason why I didn't do this is because, one, there are many directories right now, and I just didn't want to add another one. I kind of want to start something new in the podcast industry. And then two, I was having trouble with the data. So, first thing I needed to do was collect data, and I was having trouble with that. The second thing I needed to do was use the Apple Podcast, the iTunes API, and connect their API with my data, and then have that show up connected at the same time. And this is a lot for someone who's only built one-page apps. So I couldn't figure that out. There is some way to do it, but then, I couldn't figure it out, and so I was just around. I was focusing on alerts for BTC and just tweaking the design a bit. Okay. So then May 2019, Open Podcast is started as a Telegram group by Fajar Sedek and Alex Edmonds. Hey, that's me. Okay. So this is important because I was working on the podcast directory at this time, and I just kept it as a Telegram group. And then I stopped working on the the directory around during the summer, and I needed a not a podcast. I needed a project to work on. So then I decided to make Open Podcast my side project and build it out to be like a forum and other things, a place where podcasters can hang out without a third party in the way, like Telegram or, I don't know, Facebook or whatever. Well, Telegram, of course, because that's what I was using. And so now people just need their emails to sign up, and then they can hang out on the forum and whatever else I decide to build. And then, yeah. Okay. So that's everything that I found interesting on the podcast industry. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. If you have any questions, you can email me at SupremeRumHam, tweet me at SupremeRumHam, find me on Telegram at SupremeRumHam. Okay. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.